My name is David Mason. I'm the current chair of ANZCART. Joining us today as part of our panel, we've got Chris Wadey, who's our administrative manager. Chris keeps the office running, keeps everything happening within ANZCART, and certainly keeps Gail and myself in track of all the things that need to happen. But yeah, for those that don't know, so ANZCART's an independent organisation. We've been around for about 30 years now, and was established, and we still are, for helping to provide leadership, I guess, information and advice concerning the ethical and scientific use of animals in research and teaching. So we've got three main pillars, one of being leadership, one of being training, and the other being financial stewardship. And at the moment, two of our big focuses are around the ComPass project, and then also around an openness agreement with institutions, and more about the openness to come. But the ComPass concept has been around for many years. Been ticking along at ANZCART conferences since 2015, 2016. There were some papers presented in the 2017, 2018 conferences, and that's really fueled the fire to try and get this project off the ground. And last year, ANZCART was very, very fortunate to be able to move forward. And with this year, we've had Professor Gail Anderson join us to actually bring the project to fruition. So Professor Anderson is well known to many of you. She's a specialist veterinary surgeon, an educator, and particularly passionate about all things animal welfare, animal ethics, pain management, and is also the current animal welfare officer at the Adelaide Uni. And she also chaired the most recent review of the NHMRC code. So we're very, very fortunate to have Gail as part, and it's been wonderful to get the project to this point that we're actually able to launch it and show it to everybody and get the feedback and actually get it out there into the domain and get people starting to use it. So just a couple of housekeeping things for today. We've turned off the sound for everybody in terms of, otherwise it's trying to have 140, 150 people trying to talk at the same time gets challenging. So what we're going to do is, if people can feel free to put comments through in the chat, Chris and I will coordinate that, and we'll have questions at the end, which I will facilitate via the chat mechanism. And yeah, really look forward to your feedback. There'll be some polling questions at the end, so keen to get your thoughts. This is, I guess the project is dynamic, and it's one we're going to be looking to continue to invest in and continue to develop and grow. And so any feedback, opinions and thoughts and commentary is really, really welcome as we go along. But I'll hand across to Gail now, and we'll get started. Thank you, Gail.
Great. No, thank you. And thank you especially for all your spending part of your lunchtime in much of the country, and at each end your morning tea or afternoon tea. So thank you for taking the time out to be interested in what we're up to here. As David said, the ComPass project has been percolating along for a little while via the ANZCART members, thinking about how we could make a difference in the training area by augmenting materials that will allow people to have perhaps more consistent training materials available, as well as perhaps just increasing the standard and quality of offerings for some of the places that don't have large institutional help to do that. How are we doing this? Well, the ComPass project is a free online and interactive course. Phase 1 is what we're opening and presenting today, but there's several phases to it. How did it get to be called ComPass, or why is it called ComPass? That was a result of a competition that Anne-Marie Jackson actually ran at the Hobart ANZCART meeting last year, and it was the winner, and it obviously stands for Competency Passport. So that's what we're aiming to do with this, to achieve greater competency for those using animals. So what we've got on offer today is the core modules. There's 8 of them. They're available through the ANZCART website. The first module is really just an introductory section outlining the content of all of the 4 phases and their learning objectives for the educationalists in the crowd. Phases 2 and 3 are still in development, and phase 2 really will be the technical skills and methods. So looking at things like handling, anesthesia, aseptic technique, etc., and including some wildlife issues around trapping and netting, and basically handling with care. The phase 3, which will come online after that, is basically some templates, and we actually had a workshop at the ANZCART meeting in Hobart again talking about how we might do this. And people seem to think that if they had their SOPs formalized into a training template, that would be really useful. And so that's what we'll be working on for the third phase of the project. And then phase 4 is a bit more aspirational, in as much as we'll be looking to provide materials that are resources for vets that are coming from a practice situation and coming in to be an animal welfare officer or a university veterinarian for the first time, as well as for enhanced materials for training senior technical staff in laboratory animal settings. So what's on offer today? I guess I can't tell you how often or how many times it's free, so there's absolutely no cost to using these materials. Modules 1 to 7 have content in them to fulfill essentially the basic training that's mandated through the code and the New Zealand Guide for both members of animal ethics committees as well as animal users. And I know that jurisdictions vary enormously in their requirements for this, and I know that Animal Welfare Victoria requires material to be actually passed by the minister. So check locally and make sure that the materials are actually fit for the requirements that you have in your local jurisdiction. So each of the modules, after the introductory module, has a case study, which basically gives you an example and underlines the principles contained within that module. There's lots of web links within each of the learning modules, so that for those that want some extra information or to find references and that sort of thing, that those are available online for them. And then at the end of each of the content modules, there's also a quiz, and it's really designed as a formative feedback. So it's a developmental feedback for you to see how you're traveling with the content of that module, as well as interactive flashcards and little mini quizzes on the way through each of the modules. And again, the learning objectives for each module are stated in each one as well. So getting into the actual content modules, starting at the beginning, the legislation, what's included in it and how it varies. And obviously with the joys of federation, we have states that all have responsibility for their own welfare training and state legislation. So it will vary from state to state. I've put in an interactive map which looks like this. And when you click on the state where you are, you'll find the appropriate legislation that covers the animal welfare aspects in your area, and the same for New Zealand. The Aussie Code and the New Zealand Guide both cover what's defined as scientific purposes, so that's outlined. And of course, because we are separate states and New Zealand, the definition of an animal actually varies a little bit from state to state, and that's covered as well in this module. So when do I need ethics approval? Those of you without veterinary schools or animal science schools probably say always, but that's actually not absolutely the case. For veterinary training or for animal husbandry training, where the animals are actually being or undergoing normal husbandry practice on their home farm and at the appropriate time of year, if there's students involved in that, it actually doesn't require ethics approval. And outlining again, when veterinary students are training in a hospital setting, you similarly don't need to have ethics approval for that, as long as it's for the animal's benefit and it's not actually a research project. So there are a few exceptions to animal use, and those are outlined as well for those that are in teaching scenarios that fit the bill there. We talk about the approval process, and I also emphasise in this one the use of lay language and how important it is to make sure that all the members of the committee are actually able to understand the application. There's a section on the responsibilities of the animal user, and again, a case study and resources and a quiz. So module 2, we get into the actual application process itself and talk about what makes up an animal ethics committee and what powers an AEC has. They're structured very similarly between Australia and New Zealand. The categories of membership are called something slightly different, but that's outlined in this module. Their expectations, what do they need to see in your application? And I've tried to highlight to researchers especially that it's not a scientific application, it's actually an application for the use of animals from a welfare point of view. So we're thinking about the animal's day and introducing that concept of what will the animal experience, so trying to highlight to the ethics committee what procedures will be done and what impacts that will have on the animal that's being used. And then there's some information around compliance frameworks and who oversees the AEC and how different institutions are licensed at the state level. And again, there's a case study and resources enclosed, as well as a quiz at the end for understanding how that's progressing. So moving on to some fairly meaty stuff, research project and teaching activity planning. And this is one module that we had quite a bit of input from the folks from CSIRO in as well. First question, are animals really necessary? Can we actually use models or simulators for skills training, especially for some of the basic technical skills? Can we actually use inanimate models? We then go on to talk about using the PREPARE guidelines for research planning, as well as the ARRIVE and Essential 10 guidelines for research publishing. The aspects of blinding, randomization and bias in research projects are highlighted too. And the emphasis put on justification of animal use and the trying to decide how you generate the numbers required, and the importance of consulting with a statistician throughout the process. And again, there's both resources and a quiz involved in the module. So in the fourth module, we're looking at animal well-being and the 3 R's. So the concepts of the 5 freedoms and the 5 domains and the concepts of welfare are covered. What defines a reduction in animal use, how we might replace animals by using models or other in silico or in vitro methods. And we talk about refinement not only from the point of view of most of our understandings of it in relation to analgesia and anesthesia use, but also with relation to environmental enrichment to enhance the ability of animals in a captive setting to express as many of their natural behaviours as possible. There's a section on recognising pain and suffering and how we might ameliorate those. And of course, in phase 2, there'll be separate modules going into much greater detail in that area. And to highlight to scientists, I was interested seeing a recent NH and MRC survey that not all scientists believe that better welfare actually made for better scientific outcomes. Disappointingly, only 60% of scientists actually held that view. So trying to highlight the fact that animals that have good welfare, good housing, and are comfortable and have most of their 5 domains catered for will actually give healthier, happy results for better, more reproducible outcomes. Again, there's a case study and resources in this module as well. So module 5 tackles one of the hoary questions of what can we expect to go wrong? So the expected adverse events, as well as the unexpected adverse events, talking around the definitions of those things and how we need to report them, and the role of the veterinarian or the welfare officer in managing adverse events within a facility, but also highlighting to the researchers that an adverse event may be well and truly predictable. And if you know that you're going to have a 10% mortality or a 5% morbidity, then including those numbers in the application so that you're anticipating the things that could go wrong. The other important thing is obviously defining the difference between a scientific and a humane endpoint. And there is a good illustration of the fact that the humane endpoint always trumps the scientific endpoint. Talk about the value of a post-mortem examination in these adverse events to not only define what has gone wrong, but also to make sure that there isn't the possibility of spread of a disease process that you're unaware of previously, and making sure that there's good welfare for the remaining animals in a study. And again, a case study and resources and a quiz are included in this module too. So module 6 is talking about, are my animals well? How we monitor wellness and recognising suffering. We talk about normal behaviours in many of the species and how to provide environments that enable them to be as comfortable and have as best welfare as we can. I also I highlight to the readers thinking about how the intervention will actually affect the animals, how it will affect their day, the cumulative effect of welfare imposts, and looking at customising the clinical record sheet or the monitoring sheet such that you're looking specifically for the things that your intervention might target or might result in. We also talk about scoring methods, grimace scales and body condition scores, as well as the things that might count in tumour progression, both size and ulceration, and some of the things that might actually act as humane endpoint triggers. And again, there's a case study and resources here, as well as the quiz at the end for progress checking. The final module involves considerations around end of life. So what is a good death? I talk about the methods of euthanasia and what that does to the physiology and the pathology of the animals. And obviously there's an enormous amount of species variability, and talk about everything from mice to snakes and everything in between. How do we confirm that death has occurred is included, and then the implications of the method of euthanasia and what that might do to your specimen collection is covered as well. And for those working in situations where an animal might be euthanized in an extensive environment, the thinking about any potential mechanisms of euthanasia and the implications that might have on predation of that carcass. So careful disposal of cadavers to make sure that they're not impacting any other animal's welfare. And I know the next topic seems a bit out of place here, but zoonoses and laboratory animal allergy are included in this module, basically just to highlight some of the infectious diseases that might be problematic if you're working with animals, some of the things that we can catch from our various species, as well as something that I must admit I was unaware of when I came to this sphere, and that's laboratory animal allergy. And the fact that if people are working with rodents over a period of several years, that the incidence of LAA is actually somewhere in the order of 30%. So a little bit of information on how that manifests and what might be done about it, and what you could do to potentially decrease the incidence of that happening. And again, a case study, resources, and the quiz are included. So module 8 is the summative quiz, sort of the quiz that counts. There's 60 questions in this. They're multiple choice type questions or matching questions where the candidate slides phrases to match with another set of phrases. There are a few questions where one actually types in a word, and there's multiple different ways of answering that, but I've tried to cover as many possibilities as possible that still give the correct sense. The pass mark's 80%, and you can have up to 3 attempts to achieve the passing mark. After gaining that 80% within the system, a certificate is generated and sent to the candidate. And I'll show you that in a bit more detail in a second. And that hopefully will be suitable for proof of training to your local animal ethics committee or whoever else might be interested. So systems considerations. We're very lucky that the University of Adelaide has allowed us to host this on the Canvas catalogue system, which is their learning and management system. To get into the system, you go to the ComPass section on the ANSITE website. So click on that and you'll get into that immediately, and there'll be a link there, which I'll show you the next steps in the next slide. The system has been written in a program called RISE 360, and it makes it accessible to users of smartphones, tablets, laptops, whatever type of internet access device you have. It should be able to deal with the ComPass training. Within the catalogue system, there's also a portfolio function which allows you to track all the things that you've achieved within the competency passport. And I'm hoping that this will allow people to transfer recognition of what they've actually passed within the system between institutions as they move throughout their career. In phase 2, we're going to have skills modules, and they hopefully will be online for you one by one. So we're going to launch those individually rather than in a big chunk, but hopefully they'll be completed towards the end of March. And then the competency training templates we're hoping for May of next year. And as I said, the stretch goal is to get the phase 4 stuff for the animal welfare officers and vets, hopefully by mid next year as well. So when we go to the ANSCART website, we go to the site link through the ComPass area. You'll see the link there. Click on that and it will take you to the landing page, which has this gorgeous fox. Click on the enroll button and that will open a registration box, which you need to put in your email and your passport oh, sorry, password, I should say, too many passports, the password. And then when that happens, an email will be automatically generated for you, and you will see your name in that email at the top of the top right-hand corner. Click on that. You'll have a little pull-down menu there that will show you the Canvas site. Click on that, and then when you do that, you should see again your familiar fox with the Animal Ethics University of Adelaide and ComPass there. Click on that, and what we should see then is the next page, which will open within the catalogue system, and each of the modules will be highlighted for the core phase 1 material. So it seems a little bit clunky in as much as you've got to go in and out of each of the modules to go through to the test. The reason for that is that, not that I'm not trusting folks, but there is a slight tendency amongst students to go straight to the test to see if they can actually bypass the learnings and do the test and then get the certificate as proof of having done the training. So we've set it up so that you actually have to go into each of the ComPass modules and at least spend some time in there before you can progress. So once you've completed a module, you then go to the next stage, which will be exiting that module and head back into the next module in another window in your server. So you have to go back to that one, then go into one, out of it again, back into two, out of it again. So it's a tiny bit clunky, but there's a good reason for that, to make sure that folks weren't just going to go straight to the test and see if they could check out without doing the training. So once you've got your 80% in your test, the system will generate a certificate which has the ANZCARD and ComPass logos on it, as well as the University of Adelaide, because they've actually financially stumped up a fair amount to help with the onboarding of this material. And we will change the certificate, obviously, depending on which of the modules subsequently in phases 2 and 3 that you've achieved with that one, and you're done. So that hopefully will act as proof for many of the jurisdictions. But as I said, Animal Welfare Victoria requires a different sort of training for their AEC members. So big thanks to all the folks that have been involved in this over the last months and for some several years. The ComPass team, I've been lucky enough to be the education officer as the leader of this, but Deirdre, Elle, Corinne, Sharon, Jane, Yvette, Nicole, Jim and Anya from New Zealand have been all active contributors, and more recently Shari from Melbourne as well. Mike Brockhouse and Kim Schultz, I'd say big thank yous to them, because they're in the learning and education team at the University of Adelaide and have been instrumental in helping get this loaded into the system and troubleshooting any technical things. And I would mention here that we don't absolutely at ANZCARD have control of the mechanics of catalogues. So if there are some technical issues, we will be dependent on Mike and Kim to help with those. So it might take a day or so to fix if there is an issue that you find. But heartfelt thanks to Chris and to Dave for all their support in getting this as far as it has, and to my favourite guinea pig, my University of Veterinarian or University vet from Adelaide that works with me, and Adam has been a very willing guinea pig to test run many of these things, and he's a terrific editor. He spots the tiniest of things, so thank you, Adam, as well. Right, I'm happy to answer questions, and I think probably at this stage we'll head back over to David and we can do some online questions. So I might
yeah, there's a whole bunch of things that come through while you've been talking. I guess first a couple from Ben David, but I think it's probably relevant for everybody, is just a little bit more questions around the Victorian situation and how the regulations relate to AEC members versus students or researchers and people applying for animal ethics.
So I know certainly in Victoria, the Animal Welfare Victoria course is the one that's mandated for AEC members. I am unsure as to how the regulations relate to training in-house of animal users that might be researchers or teachers. I'm not sure, but Dana would be the person to check about that. I suspect it's just for the AEC members that they've got that regulation, but I'm not absolutely 100% sure.
Cool. Another question is just about whether it's accepted in all jurisdictions.
That again is something that it fulfills the requirements certainly that we have in South Australia, because we don't have any other legislative requirement, but it will be important for individuals to check locally with their state regulator that this is a suitable training. And it will vary between AEC members and animal users as well, I would suggest. So they need to check that locally.
And I guess just from my perspective, one of the things that's come up over the years in talking about this has been that we have a national code that is regulated by the states that has to be enforced or managed by the different institutions. And a big part in creating the ComPass project is to try and create a standardised approach to how that is managed between institutions, both within the same state and then also institutions across different states as well. And it's still up to the individual institution or the state regulators to ensure that we are meeting the code and the requirements for the training, but this is hopefully going to at least help with that process a little bit further.
I can see one question too from Rosalind that was saying, how can you pick what's relevant to your field work and not laboratory work? The code stuff is actually common to almost everything, Ros, and there will be material in phase 2, which is more wildlife specific. So that will be, as I said, the trapping and netting and some of those practical things will be addressed more in phase 2. But the actual code requirements are actually essential, and I think the only one that perhaps isn't is assessing how are my animals well, but the euthanasia and the other aspects of monitoring, I think, are probably still very relevant.
Rosalind also asked just about, have we got any definitions of pain and suffering as part of this course?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Another question is just what happens if you don't pass, but you get your 3 attempts?
I think you have to start again. I haven't had anyone. I'll give you a little sneaky. The questions you'll be very familiar with from the feedback type questions. So if you're paying attention, you should be pretty good.
Yep. Another question is just whether or not we'll be able to integrate this with other LMSs. So University of Queensland and other places have their own LMS, and it'd be good to be able to implement that if we can read the SCORM files.
That is a technical one. The thing is that this is to be used basically from the ANZCART site, so there's no need to duplicate it, would be my first reaction, because otherwise you won't be able to get it updated, is the issue that would arise or be top of mind. Yes, it's certainly able to be put on other systems because it's part of the Articulate suite of programs, but if you want the most up-to-date version and want to have that accessible and you want the portfolio system to work, then using it within the ANZCART system via Canvas makes sense. Otherwise, you may not have the latest version of it.
Yeah. Couple of little questions just about errors with registrations and things. And I guess for anybody who's got those errors, just email ANZCART, which is just ANZCART@adelaide.edu.au, and Chris will be able to get back in contact and work out where that error is.
Well, I think, and it's something I have actually highlighted, and I should mention it. When you're going, there'll be 2 emails generated, one of which will have a link to something that says it doesn't work. Go back to the first email that you've got, and that will have your name in the top right-hand corner, and ignore the other email. Just go to your name, click on that, and you should get into Canvas. So for some reason, and I have asked the guys about getting around that, and they haven't responded yet. It's interesting. The learning and education team are not regular RISE users. They do more with Articulate, and so this is a little bit of a learning curve for them too. But it seems that first email works. If you go to your name, click on that, go to Canvas, and that's why I outlined it in the talk, because if you do that, you should be fine, irrespective of the browser that you're using.
Rosalind had also asked, which is Lee Baker also commented on, does anybody know when the code is being updated? The 2013 was the last time it was updated. I haven't heard anything.
That's a very good question. That would be one for NH and MRC. Yeah.
And how long will the competency passport be valid for? Do we have to do a refresher every few years for people?
That is an institutional thing. It will have a date on it. So our institution at the University of Adelaide says every 3 years for updates, but others may choose something different. So, and I think depending on which of the modules too, that may vary, because if you're doing an anaesthetic module and you've passed that, that's great. But if you leave it for 5 years, it's probably not that relevant anymore. So it will need to be upgraded. But that's a local regulation thing, I would think.
Yeah. Similar question from Sharon, just about have we made it mandatory SA University for investigators and AEC members, which I think that'll have to be a local institution regulation.
Yes, it's available as a resource freely. So it's up to folks what they choose to do with it. But obviously the institution has to say it's appropriate for the formal training. But I think the generation of the certificate, and I think I sincerely hope when people see the content of it that they will find that it's very suitable for most applications.
Yep.
And it should take somewhere in the order of 3.5 to 4 hours. So it's a half day of commitment of learning, which is not dissimilar certainly to many institutions face-to-face type training as well.
Laurie's also asked just about the South Australian DPI. Do they have their eyes on the ComPass project? And I guess we've certainly been actively trying to work with all the regulators within this space to ensure that they're well and truly across what's been going on, and keeping, as I guess, a fairly broad group of people involved in the development of the project as well.
Yes, there's been pretty well representation from most of Australasia. So I think the only thing we missed out on was Northern Territory.
And that harks back to On's question, which is, yeah, absolutely, we want to get this regulated. I guess this is the first to get the regulators on board, and this is the first step in creating a platform that might be able to be used in that sort of basis.
Yeah.
Across Australia.
And very willing, I've actually asked Anna in Victoria what we would need to do to gain ministerial approval to see whether we can actually make this the default training for Victorian users as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very much on the radar of next steps, but it's hard to do that without a product to show them, so that now they can see what's on offer and make sure that that's suitable for their needs, because I don't think they'll work on hypotheticals.
Another comment is, are we going to present it to the various state regulators? Absolutely. We'll try and make sure everyone's well aware of this. Jody, sorry if I put the wrong link up. I will find the right link. I just couldn't find it quickly. In terms of the link to the New Zealand code. Sarah's asked, sorry, missed the answer to the duration of validity, as someone had to ask me a question. And the answer to that was, it's just going to depend on the individual institutions. It's obviously going to vary on a case-by-case or location basis.
And I'm delighted to see that there's a New Zealander who's gotten into the system and it's working for her. Thanks for letting us know, Cheryl. That's great, because I wasn't sure any of our Kiwis had managed to come in yet. So that's brilliant that you're there too. It's all working. Good.
Can you save the progress and return at a later time if you need to do it bit by bit with the project?
Yes, you should be able to, because once you exit, you basically then can go back into the next module. So yes, you can stop and start.
And Sarah, yes, the program is free and it is open access, and that's a big part of what we're trying to achieve with this, and the reason Anscart put the resources into it. It is free and readily available. Yeah, and from somebody who's been writing using Rise, it's been really good fun, and I hope that you find it much more interesting to look at, because it's a much more interactive and it's a very visual look and a very nice looking set of materials, I think. So, and there's, as I said, there's lots of web links and there's flip cards and interactive things and wonderful images. So it's hopefully it'll be a little bit more exciting than just reading it. Yeah.
Great. Oh, we've got lots of Kiwis coming in now. That's great. Thank you. It's good. Good.
Yes, confirming 3 to 4 hours. That's what we expect it to take for most people.
Yeah, and I was going to say several of my guinea pigs have said between 3.5 and 4.
Yeah.
And
my husband was put through the paces as well. So
someone would also like the slides, Tim Dyke. so they will be available, won't they?
We are recording this, Tim, as we speak. So after a wee bit of an edit, I think I will certainly, there's probably a fairly lengthy waiting period right at the beginning that people don't want to sit through, but we'll see if we can crop that off. And then I can, if you fire me an email, I can send you the slides direct, or you can also see the whole thing. We will load it to the ANZCART website as well and have it accessible there. So if people are unsure as to getting in and out of modules or anything like that, they can have a refresher. Great.
Yep. Fantastic. I think we've answered most of the questions there, Gail. Did you want to, you had a poll to have a quick...
Okay, and this will be a real test because I haven't actually had a dummy run with this. So if nothing happens, just feel free to end the session and head off and do whatever you need to do. So again, thank you so much for participating today. I hope you find it useful. As I said, phase 2's already in development, and we've got a couple of modules well on their way. Just need to go through the ComPass team to review those. We'll be doing that shortly. And so expect to see more material popping up over the next several months. And that, as I said, that'll come up module by module. So watch this space for further developments. Okay, we'll see what we can do here with the poll. Okay. So I'm launching that. And there's 6 questions there. Can my panelists see the questions?
Yes,
You can.
Are they interactive?
They are. That is
Oh,
very good.
my goodness me. Miracle of miracles.
Yes. The first one.
Faith and big R. So can you get a sense of whether there's, oh no, we've got, I'm not seeing that anybody's voting yet. Can you vote? Okay, good. Oh, people voting. Yes, this is excellent. Oh, it's really useful information. Thank you. Thank you, because it's the kind of thing that we've been having a little bit of a guess at, but it'll be really nice to know.
Yeah, appreciate that, Cheryl. Cheryl's just mentioned that some of the questions aren't possibly relevant for everybody and we haven't got a non-applicable answer.
Oh, no, sorry. That's my bad.
Yeah.
Thank you for all those that are going to tell a colleague. Anyway, have a look and hopefully you'll be convinced that it's worthwhile when you have a peek at it. So Grant, I just saw that comment. If you go to the email with your name in it and click on your name, hopefully that will sort that out. Okay, so we've got about 80% voted so far, so give it another little while. Okay, so we've got about 86% of folks.
Yeah, Grant, your question just about the email going straight to junk. I think that I'm not sure whether that's a local issue or how that gets managed. Hopefully you should be able to select it and tell it that it's, the domain is not a junk domain. Fantastic. Well, if there's no more questions or comments, Sigal, did you have anything else?
No, that's great. Maybe I'll
Just while everyone's finishing up their questionnaire.
Okay, well, we can show people the results if they're interested too. I think
Okay.
it should automatically do that, I think, if all is working well. So maybe give them just another second, but feel free to leave at this stage if you're unable to stay on.
Question from Tim just about, can we have a copy of the slides? Then, yeah, this presentation will be up on the website fairly
And
soon.
I'm happy to send them to you, Tim. If you find me an email, it's gail.anderson@adelaide.edu.au. So GAIL. Yeah, great. Anyway, it looks as though we're nearly done. Anyone else dying to vote, or are we nearly getting there? Give it till 4 minutes. So we're closing, we're closing, we're closing, we're closed.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, dependent on local authorities, and that's very much relevant, obviously, for the animal users. Yes, that's great. And again, obviously people need to run it by their authorities, handling with care. That's really fantastic feedback. Thank you, all of those. Great. And then, okay. So that looks as though phase 4 is worth doing. Good, great. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, that's excellent. So I'm going to just shut those off now, and without further ado, I think say thank you very much for your time, and thank you to David and Chris for co-hosting, and happy to respond to any glitches. As I said, it's very much in the hands of if it's something really technical, it might be in the hands of the folks in learning and education, but we'll certainly do our best to make sure everything's functional for you. We've had numerous dummy runs, and so far we haven't had any dummy spits, so to speak, so it's been working well. Okay, thank you very much.
Fantastic. And Robert Cassidy just let us know that the code is not being reviewed at the moment. It was amended to accommodate the ban on animals for cosmetic testing, but it was written as a principles-based document, so it's not due for a renewal.
Okay, great. Okay.
Well, thank you, Robert. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Okay, have a good afternoon and rest of day, folks. Thank you. Bye now.